Well, here's a transfer rumour that I didn't think I'd be discussing. Caught me a little bit off guard, to be honest with you. I thought we'd be going into yet another day dealing with claims that Somerville was going to Roma, Aston Villa, Man United, you name it, that's where he's going. Dinos is on his way to Coventry or Leeds United. Bowen, is he going to stay? Is he going to go? Is he going to declare his future to West Ham? But instead, this particular story has kind of caught us all a little bit off guard, a little bit by surprise. And apparently, Man United have a passing interest in Ollie Scarles. Now, look, from what has been reported, they're apparently monitoring Scarles as a potential long-term successor to Luke Shaw. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't see this coming. I don't think any of us did. When people have spoken about left backs leaving West Ham this summer, most of us naturally assumed that the conversation will be centered around El Hadji Malik Diouf. Now, from almost the very moment he arrived at West Ham, Diouf made his feelings clear about his ambitions, about how good he thinks he is to be playing Champions League football very near at some stage in his future. He's never hidden that. I guess every player wants to test themselves at the highest possible level. He had a okay World Cup, no great shakes. I don't think he was very highly noticed. But football has a funny way of reminding you that ambition alone is not enough. Because if we're going to be brutally honest about El Hadji Malik Diouf, about his first season at West Ham United, it was uninspiring, if I want to be honest. There were moments where you could see exactly why we invested in the player, but there were just many afternoons where we kind of looked at the young player to still try and understand whether he's going to get to grips with English football or not. There were defensive errors, moments where his moments where his decision making let him down, and ultimately he was part of a side that got relegated. Now that's not all on him. Don't get me wrong. I'm not blaming him. The problems at West Ham last season ran much deeper than just anything on one left back. But I think it's fair to say that we kind of all expected a little bit more from El Hadj Malik Diouf. I guess what surprised me, though, was that whilst everyone was watching Diouf and thinking he's the next player that's going to want to leave West Ham United, it's Ollie Scarles who's been quietly grabbing the attention of clubs higher up the footballing pyramid. And when I look back over last season, I honestly found it difficult to decide which of the two, between Malik and Scarles, deserved the starting berth at left back. There were weeks when I thought Diouf had done enough to keep his place, and then Scarles would come in and do reasonably well, and I think that maybe he should be the one earning a regular start. Then the following weekend, I'd be questioning both of them all over again. I think what's probably the biggest compliment and criticism at the same time that I could give to both is neither player nailed down that position. Neither player made that shirt their own. The truth is, they both have obvious ability. They both have a lot of potential. Neither of them are really the finished article, but they both still got an awful lot to learn. And that's exactly, and I know I've said this a couple of times regarding other players, but that's exactly why I think a season in the Championship could be one of the best things that could happen probably to both these players if they both stay at West Ham. Now, I know that sounds strange to say, but sometimes a player's development can be a lot better when learning your trade in a league like the Championship. And I genuinely believe Ollie Scarles stands to gain much more playing in the Championship football than sitting on Manchester United's bench, hoping that he's going to one day replace Luke Shaw. The problem is that young footballers don't always see things that way. When one of the biggest clubs comes calling, it's incredibly difficult to ignore. But here's the question: how many actually make it? Right, before I rabble on, if you're new to this channel, or if you've watched the show before but yet to become a subscriber, a QR code has appeared in that top corner there. Click on that, takes you to the subscription page. Subscription is free of charge. If you enjoy the content, why not subscribe? So, as I've said, moving, how many players, when they move to a bigger club, actually, how many players does it benefit? Because history, especially at West Ham, tell us that moving to a bigger club doesn't always give you a bigger opportunity. In fact, quite often, it becomes exactly the opposite. And West Ham have seen that happen more times than we'd care to remember, especially over the last few years. And I'm going to give you a few examples. First one, Harrison Ashby. Remember him? I genuinely thought Ashby had a big future at West Ham. He was just breaking through, but as he decided we were trying to get him to sign a new deal, but he decided that he'd leave the club. He'd made 7 appearances for West Ham, but he decided that the grass was greener and he moved to Newcastle United. Now, he only made 7 appearances. Now, had he not picked up, was really unlucky for him. Had he not picked up a couple of injuries, I think he would have made more appearances and maybe would have given them the confidence to sign a new deal at West Ham. But his representatives believed there was an better opportunity elsewhere. Newcastle came calling. Fantastic move on paper, only it didn't quite work out that way. Since joining Newcastle, Ashby hasn't made a single senior appearance for the football club, not one. Instead, he spent his time moving from loan to loan, trying to rebuild a career that looked so very promising at West Ham. Swansea, QPR, Bradford, and now another loan spell at Luton Town. 4 loan moves in the time that he signed for Newcastle United. Still waiting for that Newcastle breakthrough. Now, none of us can say with absolute certainty that he would have become a West Ham first choice right back had he stayed, but I kind of believe that he would have had a clearer pathway and better chance into first team senior football had he stayed. Then we have another player who kind of hit West Ham by storm and then decided again to move elsewhere. Sonny Perkins. All right, he was a decent striker. Another player, however, who chose not to sign a new deal at West Ham. Another player who believed that his next chapter of his career would be better away from the club. Again, made sense. Leeds United offering an exciting project, but fast forward a few years and the picture looks very different. 4 senior appearances for Leeds United. I think he scored on his first senior appearance and everyone was going, there you go, we should have kept him. But that was it. 4 senior appearances, relegation, and then loan spells at Oxford United and Leyton Orient. And now a permanent move to Wigan Athletic. Again, a career that hasn't quite gone where he probably expected it to do so. Look, I'm not suggesting for a minute that these players have failed. Far from it. They're still professional footballers. They're still earning a living from the game they love. That's something most youngsters can only dream of after playing in academies. But what I am saying is that neither career has accelerated in the way people imagined when those moves were announced. And then we have perhaps one of the biggest temptations of all, a big club like Man City knocking on your door. How many teenagers are honestly going to say no to that? Very few. And that's exactly what happened with Divine Mukasa, one of the brightest talents to come through West Ham's academy. At 16 years of age, he decided that his future lay at Man City. Again, no one can blame him. When arguably the best run football club probably in Europe, well, I don't know with all the 115 charges, but, when it comes to player development, one of the best run, it's difficult not to be tempted. But here's the reality. Man City's academy is overflowing with elite young talent. There's so many players that they've got on their books, wave after wave of outstanding talent arriving. And Man City make a point of going out and trying to take players from other academies, and they do it quite successfully. And that's what happened to Mukasa. Every single year, however, another group leaves, only to be replaced by another apparent elite group. It's incredibly easy to disappear in that Man City system. Mukasa is a really decent, talented central midfielder. Nobody doubts that. But instead of becoming part of Man City's first team squad, he has found himself following a route that's taken by many hundreds of players before him. Loans, development football, probably the odd game or two in a cup competition, waiting, hoping, trying to impress, but then nothing materializes. And the same thing happened to one more player, and that was Divin Mabama. Now, another player many West Ham supporters genuinely hoped he would become our next first team striker. Again, the same pattern. He turned down a new contract, joined Man City. Last season, he found himself on loan at Stoke City. Look, 28 appearances, 5 goals, 1 assist. That's not a bad return playing in Championship football at Stoke. That's pretty decent. But it's hardly the meteoric rise that many predicted when he left West Ham. And here's the really interesting part. Man City are now staging what is, in effect, a shop window match, a game designed specifically for clubs to come and watch young talent that Man City have, who they may be willing to either sell or loan out. And West Ham are expected to have representatives at this showcase match, this shop window match. Who knows? Perhaps we'll end up bringing 1 or 2 former academy players back to East London with us. Look, all these examples point towards exactly the same conclusion. The grass isn't always greener. What they don't always see is the queue of international footballers standing between them and first team football, especially at clubs like Man City. Yes, of course, if you're talented, you're going to break through. But how many players really break through? And I've said this before, it's a very, very small percentage of talent in academies, in Premier League football academies, that actually break through to senior team football. The queue of academy prospects all fighting for exactly the same opportunity. And that queue gets longer every single transfer window. Sometimes playing 30, 40 games for a club like West Ham is probably worth infinitely more than spending 2 seasons playing either under 21 football or being sent out on loan. Because nothing develops a footballer more like senior football. And that brings me all the way back to Ollie Scarles. Look, unlike some of the players I've mentioned, or all of the players I've mentioned, there is absolutely no suggestion that Ollie Scarles is agitating for a move away from West Ham. There's been no public indication that that's what he wants to do. No stories about him refusing contracts or reports of him pushing for an exit or anything like that. This is simply another club reportedly keeping tabs on a bright young talent who has just been unfortunate to be relegated with his club. And if that's true, that's good, because it tells you West Ham are producing talented footballers once again. It kind of tells you that clubs are recognizing the work that's being done at the club. And perhaps more importantly, it tells you that Ollie Scarles is obviously doing, or has obviously done, something right in the season that he's just had at West Ham, even though we've been relegated. And that's exactly why I think West Ham have got to handle this situation differently, because for the first time in a long time, it's beginning to feel as though the football club is going to be run properly with a plan. A year ago, I wouldn't have said that. But today, it feels different when you've got Nuno in the spotlight, who has shown throughout his career that he's not afraid to use young talent if they earn their opportunity to play. And we've got Niels Koppen helping shape the recruitment strategy. And we know that he has a preference for bringing in young talent as well. And Sullivan is also out of the equation when it comes to player transfers. And for once, we don't appear willing to accept. That's all right, still on. We don't appear willing to accept the first offer that lands on the table just because it gets a player off the wage bill. And that gives me confidence, because if Man United are really interested in Ollie Scarles, then that's a compliment to both the player and to the West Ham Academy. Now, if Man United think, however, they're going to be able to pick him up simply cheap, simply because we've been relegated to the Championship, then they're in for a surprise. You've only got to look at what's happening with our stance on Somerville, and you've only got to look at what's happened when we sold Fernandes to Spurs. This isn't the West Ham of old. We're not desperate to sell, even though we've been relegated. We're not panicking because of that. And we shouldn't be giving away what could be one of our brightest young prospects before we can really see what he's capable of. I think quite possibly this coming season, he's going to be playing an awful lot more games. Let's not forget, Scarles is only at the very beginning of his career. Nowhere near the finished article. Nor's Malik, both of them still have weaknesses in their games. Both still have areas where they need to improve, but that's completely normal. We're about to embark on a championship campaign where squad depth is going to be absolutely vital. 46 league games, don't know how many cup games we're going to have. Every squad member is going to have a role to play. Scarles will get his opportunities, I'm convinced of that. And who knows, by this time next year, we might not even be having this sort of conversation. We could be talking about Ollie Scarles as West Ham's undisputed first choice left back. Or perhaps we'll be talking about him helping West Ham win promotion back to the Premier League. If I could give Ollie Scarles one bit of advice, it'd be simply this. Ignore the noise, ignore the speculation, ignore these headlines. Keep your head down, keep working, keep learning, and keep playing for West Ham United. Because I genuinely believe another season at West Ham could really be the making of him. History has shown us that plenty of young players have left this football club believing the grass was greener elsewhere. Very few, I'm afraid, have actually proved that to be the case. There are exceptions, of course. We once had a player called Declan who stayed at West Ham throughout his development, and we benefited from that. We had one of the best midfields in the Premier League. We had a player who made his international debut. We had a player who won a European trophy with us, and then we ended up selling him for £100 million. So, players, if they decide to stay at West Ham, could really benefit if they do. Look, tell me what you think. If Man United are genuinely interested, we should be saying thank you. But it's nice you've recognised the talent we've got. But unless you're prepared to make a stupid offer, we're not going to let this player go. I'd politely tell you to go away. And who knows? Like I said, 12 months from now, Man United might still want him. The difference is, if he has a fantastic season, they're going to have to pay a hell of a lot more than what they might be interested in paying now. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed the video, like I said, please become a subscriber. Hit the like button. Hit the bell notification to let you know when I'm next on. And there's a hype button down there as well. Like, hype, bell, and subscribe. Tell me what you think. If Man United come in for Ollie Scarles, should we just take take money for him? Or do you want to see him develop further at West Ham?